In this month's Lives of the Spirit, we have started to get to know Dorothy Day. There is a quote from her connected to our bread communion that I found intriguing. It felt like there was something meaningful there, but the language needed some translating for me. Here are her words. We cannot love God unless we love one another, and to love, we must know each other. We know him in the breaking of the bread, and we know each other in the breaking of the bread, and we are not alone anymore. Heaven is a banquet, and life is a banquet too, even with a crust where there is companionship. Dorothy Day was Catholic. There are wonderful metaphors in the language used by Christians, and while they are used by them, they are not only theirs to use. In the Christian children's song, This Little Light of Mine, I'm Gonna Let It Shine, we find a great example. That I want to celebrate and encourage my light to shine, that I won't hide it under a bushel, that I will share it everywhere I go, and that I won't let anyone it out. These ideas can illuminate my path, even if I'm not talking about the light being Jesus or God. Take me down to the river to pray is another example. Feeling drawn to the river for renewal and communication with the Spirit of life is something I want to be able to do, something to move me. The images and ideas can be expanded to new understanding and inspiration. And I also have my own definition or translation for the word God. God means to me the powerful life energy of the earth and beyond, the life energy of the universe. I don't believe that other religions own the word God. I know that for many of us, the word has a lot of baggage and may conjure up the image of a bearded man in the sky or even the patriarchy. But I have reclaimed it to myself to mean something different, something like a life force, the earth, that goes beyond our planet and into the universe. And I know there is a life force beyond me, something I see in the flower in my garden that turns into an eggplant, something that turns the caterpillar eating the milkweed into a butterfly, something that makes the birth of a human possible with an egg, a sperm, and a womb. You probably have your own meaningful examples too. You may call it by another name than God. Unitarian Universalists, we sit together in these pews and we have no expectation whatsoever that we call the sacred by the same name or believe the same things, and that alone is pretty miraculous. I return to the words of Dorothy Day, which I want to explore line by line. I start with this. We cannot love God unless we love one another, and to love we must know each other. To love we must know each other. How do we put this into our lives? What does love mean here, do you think? Perhaps love is care. Is it giving time and listening? Is love shown toward working toward the understanding of the other person? Over 20 years ago, Bob Shibley stood at this pulpit and wrestled with Jesus' instructions to love our enemies in the context of the September 11 attacks. He asked how one can love such an enemy, and what would that look like? He suggested that it would include truly listening to them and trying to empathize. Love your enemy. Love one another. These are religious ideas that deserve exploration in different eras. So today, we dig into them again. To be honest, as a human, I feel limited by my ability to do what Bob Shibley and Dorothy Day are suggesting. Love one another. Is that loving everyone? Friends and family and our church community right here. This is where I work on most of my loving and knowing. Perhaps some people are able to love everyone all over the world and try to understand and take time to listen and to show deep care through their actions. But of course, each of us is limited. There is not enough time in any of our individual lives to give the deep care everyone on the planet deserves. And since we cannot reach out to everyone in need, there are times we just want to change the way things work. How can we make something more just in our society? We think of ways, but we learn that changing entrenched systems is very difficult. When there are powerful people gaining a great deal by the way systems are in place, we see them fight with all their might to keep change and justice from happening. Even small changes can take years. But when each person does their own loving actions, I do believe they add up. And each loving action can change the life of another, or at least change their day. And I think I want to get a t-shirt now that says, "Love Local." Because that is what feels possible now. And Dorothy Day says we must know one another. I read that every day, more superficial interactions with people in our community are very important to our well-being. When we chat with the person at the coffee shop who made the beautiful design on our latte, or when we smile and nod our head to someone who's waiting at the bus stop with us, it makes us feel like we're living in a safe, benign environment where there's general goodwill. When Dorothy Day says we must know one another, I don't think she's talking about the superficial greetings between those of us who pass in the urban environment, despite the benefit of those interactions. But maybe she's thinking about caring enough to find out someone's story, to find a connection human to human. We humans are great at projection. We make lots of assumptions, but we cannot put everyone who meets certain characteristics in the same box, can we? So I know it must mean knowing them as an individual person. I feel like I need to tell Dorothy Day that once again, I feel so limited. I can work on doing this better, especially when I know that hope that it creates a better world and know that it creates a loving community. But I still feel like my knowing is a local one. Know local. It is the effort I make to get to know those in my world a little bit better and not make assumptions about them. To keep open to learning more about each person that I come in contact with. And for this, I return to one of my last sermons about rest. Rest as resistance. The world is big. Even my community is big. And I learned years ago from a book called From Good to Great by James Collins that the best size for a company is 120. Since that's the maximum number that people can actually know each other well enough to have a bond. Our huge urban situations demand much more of us than that. And the information coming from all over the world, from the Ukraine, from Gaza, from Antarctica, from DC, from Georgia, it's coming in at a pace that no human being can absorb. And we can't know what's happening, and we can't know the people the way Dorothy Day, I think, is talking about here. So do I say, Dorothy Day, it can't be done? Or do I just continue exploring and let's see what comes? One thing that comes to mind for me is that knowing one another helps us find connections, and that if I don't know you, it's much easier for me to treat you as the other. Here's her full quote again. We cannot love God unless we love one another. And to love, we must know each other. We know him in the breaking of the bread, and we know each other in the breaking of the bread. And we are not alone anymore. Heaven is a banquet, and life is a banquet too, even with a crust where there is companionship. The hymn, when she says we know him in the breaking of the bread, is capitalized, and therefore I believe she means God. So what is your version of God? Spirit of life, the energy and power of the universe, those are mine. Goddess, God by whatever definition. We know him, we know Spirit of life in the breaking of the bread. In the Christian writings, breaking bread sometimes means referring to Jesus being broken. And sometimes it refers to the broken pieces of bread, representing each of us as part of a whole. It is easy in our society to feel isolated and to not feel part of a whole. Independence is heralded as an honorable goal. Don't need others, it's weak. Don't depend on others. There's even comedy when adults are living at home with their parents. American culture says that's not good, while in other cultures, living at home is helpful to all and considered to be a good choice. So now I am imagining myself as a piece of bread, with the bread representing the whole of the earth, and I am one piece. When we break bread together, I take my piece and eat it. You take your piece and eat it. And we are together, in person, eating together, aware of the oneness that we have with the wheat, with the seeds, with the sun, and with everyone gathered at the table. Everyone gathered in this sanctuary, in the pews, now. This is inspiring and hopeful. We know him in the breaking of the bread, and we know each other in the breaking of the bread, and we are not alone anymore. I'm challenging myself to get to this place of spiritual connectedness whenever I eat with another, with my husband, with my extended family, or at the next plant-based potluck, with all of the bowls of shared food. In our family, we sang a song before eating, and we still do, that brought these ideas to life in a slightly different way. Thank you for this food, for this food, for this glorious, glorious food, and the animals, and the vegetables, and the minerals that make it possible. And then we added my husband's family's bon appetit that he grew up with, and then amen. So that was a meaningful ritual in our home and continues to this day. When we break bread together, sing together, share the highs and lows of our days together, we are not alone. Let us find ways to break bread together. The last part of Dorothy Day's quote is this: heaven is a banquet, and life is a banquet too, even with a crust where there is companionship. So heaven is a banquet. A possible couple of meanings for heaven are a view of a great afterlife, the best of life we can imagine, or the best of life we can imagine here on earth. Most Unitarian Universalists do not believe in heaven or hell as something that happens in an afterlife. But maybe some in the pews do, and that is fine. It is often said by Unitarian Universalists that we make our own heaven and hell here on earth. And I do believe some people create hell on earth for others, especially people who have power and are selfish and abuse their power. They can create a world of have and have-nots. They already have, and they're doing it now more. And white supremacy culture creates hell on earth, to be sure. So Dorothy Day goes on to say, and life is a banquet too. Life is a banquet. Banquet makes me think of something big, over-the-top, meal of plenty. Life can certainly be like that. There is indeed a great deal of possibility in our lives. Even before the thousands of podcasts and memes and Facebook messages and texts and celebrities to follow on TikTok and billboards and multiple distractions, even before all that, there were fireflies to watch, stories to learn about the stars, the tales of the ancients, songs to sing, and poems to memorize. There were also horrible losses to face, There was the hard work of growing food and harvesting, and there still is all of those things to fill a life. So life can definitely be full and over the top in any era. And it is a way to view one's life that is given to each of us as a banquet that I find meaning and joy. Thank you, Dorothy Day. Then she says, life is a banquet, even with a crust where there is companionship. Yes, companionship. We know that we need other people in our lives, and there is the possibility of companionship here today with each other. Maybe you can feel it. And in hard times, the material and emotional place might be merely a crust. It feels like a crust, a kind of leftover part that was left when the good stuff has been consumed. Some of us here today might feel like life is merely a crust. It can feel like that sometimes. But imagine a small group eating together, each with only a crust, but with stories and offers to help each other, and maybe some giggling. Perhaps life is more of a banquet when we are together. And we can have companionship too with our ancestors when we bring them forward and remember what they have given us. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. And when we have companionship with the earth, we can feel the banquet when we care for the earth, like in the song we sang, we are keepers of the earth. With its riches and its beauty, every river feeds our soul. And we can find companionship with those who need us, those who need food and clothing and drink and visits of all kinds of care that are needed. And we can feel companionship making our life a banquet, full of the Spirit of life. And for this, we can be grateful. And as we head into Thanksgiving, I invite you into gratitude. I invite you into companionship, into breaking bread together, each of us part of the whole. May it be so.